Hello, my name is Ken, and I wanted to tell you my faith story for just a moment. Now, this is a story of how I became a Christian in the first place. My parents raised me in a Christian home, and so around the house we would talk about the Bible and they would read me Bible stories. As a matter of fact, there was a book written by Kenneth Taylor. It was a bunch of Bible stories that were written for kids. Every night my parents would read to me a story from that book, or maybe two stories, and it would have a picture, a couple of paragraphs, and a couple of questions just to see if you were paying attention as a kid. So we had read through this a few times, and a week before my 5th birthday, I remember one night my mom was reading me the story of the crucifixion. So it had a picture of Jesus Christ on the cross, and then 2 paragraphs and a couple of questions. Well, after my mom was done asking me the questions, she asked me another question. She said, "Do you understand what I'm talking about here? Do you understand about the crucifixion and what happened there?" And I did. I mean, my parents had brought me to church a few times a week, and I heard Bible stories there. People were teaching me basic things about Christianity, about life, about God, and things like that. But that was the first time that anybody had ever challenged me with the question of how am I going to respond to what I know about God? And here were the basic things that I knew at the time, but I just really hadn't put them together too carefully. One was that I had done things that were wrong, and having done things that were wrong, or sins, there was a penalty for that. And the only way to pay the penalty for that sin is death. Now, instead of my dying for my sins, God set it up in such a way that he sent his only begotten Son to the earth so that whoever believes in him wouldn't have to die, but instead would have everlasting life. Now, I'm not talking about physical death here, but I mean eternally be separated from God and face the punishment, the eternal punishment of suffering. And so my mom asked me those questions. She said, "Do you understand who Jesus is? Do you understand what sin is? Do you understand the ramifications of your sin?" And she put it in the words that an almost 5-year-old could understand, and basically told me the good news about how God loved me and sent his Son to the cross to die for my sins. I remember what I did next when she asked me the question and she said, "Okay, are you ready to make a decision here?" I said, "Can I be alone for a minute and just let me think?" So I walked back to my bedroom and I thought for a little bit, do I understand these things? Yes, I do. But I realized, and this is something that I remember from that moment, reinforced in my mind because my mom made me tell this story over and over again after I had become a Christian. And so I, kind of remembered what it was. But I remember going back in my room and just thinking really hard about it and saying, okay, I know who Jesus Christ is. I know what sin is. I know how this all fits together now. But I realize when I make this decision, I'm choosing for the rest of my life to walk down a certain path where I'm following God. And am I really old enough to make a decision for the older version of me about what path I walk down? Well, I realized what the truth was. I was confronted with the facts, and I felt like, yes, this is the right decision to make. And so the younger me made a decision on behalf of all of me throughout all ages past, or all ages in the future. And I chose to put my faith in Jesus Christ. What I did is I walked back out and I talked to my mom and I said, I understand the basics. And so we talked for a few minutes and then we prayed. And I really didn't know how to pray or what to say in a prayer per se. I mean, I had a memorized prayer that I said at the meal times, but basically what she did was she said a sentence and she said, now, if you believe in this sentence, then go ahead and say it to God. And if you don't believe in this sentence, then let's just stop and talk about it. So she said several sentences about what my sin was all about, the penalty for my sin, who Jesus is, how I'm forgiven through Christ by God, by grace, because of my faith. And so I said these things, I believed them, and then at that moment there was a big change that came into my life. From that time onward, it was like all I could think of myself was a Christian, not just a man, well, just a boy, not just a person, but someone who belonged to God. And from that moment I felt adopted into God's family like one of his own children, and I felt like ever since the Holy Spirit who's come to live inside of me has treated me like one of God's own. That's the story of how I became a Christian. I tell you this because I'm releasing this video on Mother's Day 2020, and I just wanted to say Happy Mother's Day to my mom, and thank you so much for being involved in that very important conversation I had with God that changed my life eternally. Happy Mother's Day, Mom.